Ezekiel 40, 1 through 27. Devotional focus verse. And the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I shall show thee. For to the intent that I might show them unto thee art thou brought hither. Declare all that thou seest to the house of Israel. Ezekiel 40:4. While visiting St. Louis, Missouri as tourists, my wife and I went to see the Gateway Arch. At 630 feet tall, the height of a 63-story building, that sweeping curve of stainless steel is an imposing sight. When I learned how the arch was constructed, I was even more amazed. The base of the structure is two legs comprised of 142 equilateral triangles that curve upward until they meet in the middle. Think of what precision was required in the measurements and calculations. And consider how well executed the construction had to be in order for the two sides to come perfectly together at the top of the arch. The feat was accomplished so expertly that when the two sides met, virtually no adjustment was needed. In addition, the whole construction project was done without any loss of life or even serious injury. The view from inside the arch is breathtaking. One can see about 30 miles in all directions. We were also fascinated by what you see when you look up from directly below the center of the arch. From that vantage point, the base is so wide that neither leg is in your peripheral vision. You can only see the top of the arch, so it looks like a long cement building floating in the sky. As remarkable as the St. Louis Arch is, it pales by comparison to the handiwork of God. Imagine Ezekiel's awe when he saw a vision of a future temple in restored Israel, designed and constructed by God Himself. The description recorded in today's text contains measurements and details of a massive structure in the temple complex. It appeared to Ezekiel as the frame of a city because it was surrounded by massive walls, courts, towers, and gates, just as an ancient city would have been. In our focus verse, Ezekiel's divine guide told the prophet to set his heart upon all he was shown. He was to pay close attention and carefully note every detail so he could declare the vision to his fellow exiles. The vision indicated that a time of restoration was coming, a time when faithful people would worship God in a magnificent place of worship in the land of Israel, and the blessings of God would flow freely. What is the lesson for us in this amazing description? Like Ezekiel, we must set our hearts on all that God reveals to us. The Holy Spirit reaches out to each of us to reveal God's holiness, our sinfulness, and our need for His forgiveness. As we respond and receive salvation, and then continue to carefully acknowledge and obey God, we will be prepared to worship in the glorious temple that Ezekiel saw. Background information. Scholars view chapters 40 through 48 of Ezekiel in various ways. Some see them as a literal prophecy that the exiles of Ezekiel's era would one day be restored to their land and would rebuild the temple. Others interpret these chapters as an allegorical description of the Christian church and a reassurance that God will provide a different priesthood and worship system for His people than what they have previously known. Some see chapters 40 through 48 through an apocalyptic perspective and believe that the images are primarily mythic in nature and were connected to pagan ideas prevalent in the world of Ezekiel's day. Many see these chapters from a dispensationalist viewpoint, that this temple is real and will be built in the coming millennial age. Ezekiel's temple will memorialize God's work for Israel and the rich types and shadow examples that looked ahead to the perfect work of the Messiah, Jesus Christ. This is the view taken by our church. Chapter 40 continues the theme of Israel's future restoration that began in chapter 33. Chapters 40 through 42 focus on Ezekiel's vision of a rebuilt temple. To Ezekiel, the temple was a symbol of Israel's national identity, in that it represented access to God and salvation. Ezekiel had lived most of his life in exile, deprived of this access. His vision of restored temple worship in Israel's post-exile future framed Israel's future redemption and restoration in a way that he could comprehend, and confirmed God's faithfulness to Israel. In Ezekiel's vision, a divinely appointed guide led the prophet through the temple complex. While the word temple in Scripture sometimes refers to a roofed building that was the Lord's house, it more commonly refers to the whole area enclosed by walls, inside which God's people gathered to worship. Precise measurements were taken, and Ezekiel was told to record what he saw and declare it to the people of Israel. Like many of Ezekiel's prophetic revelations and visions, this one is dated. It took place about 573 BC, 14 years after the fall of Jerusalem to the armies of Nebuchadnezzar. If beginning of the year in verse 1 refers to the religious calendar, then the Passover was near. If it refers to the beginning of the civil calendar, then it coincided with the Feast of Tabernacles. Either way, the vision occurred during a pilgrimage season when the captives were unable to gather at Jerusalem to worship at the temple as the law mandated. As a member of the priesthood, Ezekiel would have been acutely aware of this, and Jerusalem and the temple would have been in his daily thoughts. Ezekiel's vantage point from the very high mountain gave him something like an aerial or plan view as the man measured the temple. The cubit is a unit of measure historically regarded as equal to the distance from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, and therefore does not have a precise length. Throughout history, each culture has had different lengths of cubits, and usually a short or common cubit and a long royal or sacred cubit. The cubit used in our text was most certainly a sacred cubit, and according to one Hebrew source, this would have made the reed the man used about 10.5 feet long, slightly higher than regulation basketball hoop height. In verse 5, the man began by measuring the perimeter wall around the temple, and the height of it was 1 reed, and the width of it was 1 reed. Square chambers constructed along the wall on the north, south, and east sides were 1 reed square. This wall surrounded the entire temple area. Large gates for entrance and exit are described in detail beginning at verse 6. These gates were located on 3 sides of the structure and had guard chambers along each side. A worshiper would be required to pass through gates, climb stairs, and cross large courtyards in order to approach the actual temple. There was no gate on the western side, the side closest to the temple itself, so access to the Lord's immediate presence was restricted. According to verses 22 and 26, 7 steps led upward from the outer courtyard to the inner court. This indicates that the inner court and the temple itself were elevated, perhaps on some type of platform above the ground surrounding it. This second level had 3 gates on its inside border, corresponding to the 3 outer gates on the south, east, and north walls of the temple complex. These 6 entryway structures or porticos were identical in size and layout. If a person were to enter the outer southern gate, he would go up 7 steps into that portico, walk the length of it, about 87 feet, past 3 guard stations on each side, and into the main courtyard. He would then walk about 175 feet to the inner southern gate, up 8 steps, and into the inner southern gate portico. Entry from the east and north sides was similar. The only purely decorative element described were palm trees on some of the walls. A comparison of the measurements given for this future temple to the ones that existed during the eras of Solomon Ezra, and Herod indicates that Ezekiel was viewing a temple that has not yet existed. Conclusion. Someday we will worship in the temple revealed to Ezekiel if we serve God faithfully in this life. What a glorious hope that is.
Ezekiel chapter 40. In the 25th year of our captivity, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after that the city was smitten, in the selfsame day the hand of the Lord was upon me, and brought me thither. In the visions of God brought he me into the land of Israel, and set me upon a very high mountain, by which was as the frame of a city on the south. And he brought me thither, and, behold, there was a man, whose appearance was like the appearance of brass, with a line of flax in his hand, and a measuring reed, and he stood in the gate. And the man said unto me, Son of man, behold with thine eyes, and hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I shall show thee, for to the intent that I might show them unto thee art thou brought hither, declare all that thou seest to the house of Israel. And behold a wall on the outside of the house round about, and in the man's hand a measuring reed of 6 cubits long by the cubit and in hand breadth, so he measured the breadth of the building, 1 reed, and the height, 1 reed. Then came he unto the gate which looketh toward the east, and went up the stairs thereof, and measured the threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad, and the other threshold of the gate, which was 1 reed broad. And every little chamber was 1 reed long, and 1 reed broad, and between the little chambers were 5 cubits, and the threshold of the gate by the porch of the gate within was 1 reed. He measured also the porch of the gate within, 1 reed. Then measured he the porch of the gate, 8 cubits, and the post thereof, 2 cubits, and the porch of the gate was inward. And the little chambers of the gate eastward were 3 on this side, and 3 on that side, they 3 were of 1 measure, and the posts had 1 measure on this side and on that side. And he measured the breadth of the entry of the gate, 10 cubits, and the length of the gate, 13 cubits. The space also before the little chambers was 1 cubit on this side, and the space was 1 cubit on that side, and the little chambers were 6 cubits on this side, and 6 cubits on that side. He measured then the gate from the roof of one little chamber to the roof of another, the breadth was 25 cubits, door against door. He made also posts of 80 cubits, even unto the post of the court round about the gate. And from the face of the gate of the entrance unto the face of the porch of the inner gate were 50 cubits. And there were narrow windows to the little chambers, and to their posts within the gate round about, and likewise to the arches, and windows were round about inward, and upon each post were palm trees. Then brought he me into the outward court, and, lo, there were chambers, and a pavement made for the court round about, 30 chambers were upon the pavement. And the pavement by the side of the gates over against the length of the gates was the lower pavement. Then he measured the breadth from the forefront of the lower gate unto the forefront of the inner court without, 100 cubits eastward and northward. And the gate of the outward court that looked toward the north, he measured the length thereof, and the breadth thereof. And the little chambers thereof were 3 on this side and 3 on that side, and the posts thereof and the arches thereof were after the measure of the first gate, the length thereof was 50 cubits, and the breadth 25 cubits. And their windows, and their arches, and their palm trees, were after the measure of the gate that looketh toward the east, and they went up unto it by 7 steps, and the arches thereof were before them. And the gate of the inner court was over against the gate toward the north, and toward the east, and he measured from gate to gate 100 cubits. After that he brought me toward the south, and behold a gate toward the south, and he measured the posts thereof and the arches thereof according to these measures. And there were windows in it and in the arches thereof round about, like those windows, the length was 50 cubits, and the breadth 25 cubits. And there were 7 steps to go up to it, and the arches thereof were before them, and it had palm trees, one on this side, and another on that side, upon the posts thereof. And there was a gate in the inner court toward the south, and he measured from gate to gate toward the south 100 cubits.